42-6, Colorado suffers its first loss of the season, the first loss of the Coach Prime era. Coach Prime was great in the post-game press conference. We'll get to that in a bit, but not much went right for the Buffaloes out here on Autzen Stadium's turf.
Yeah, and he didn't make excuses. He said, hey, that was a good old-fashioned butt kicking, and we lost in all three phases, and just didn't do what they wanted to do today, and that happens. And give him credit. He doesn't shy away from these things when they lose, and he did the same thing at Jackson State. I often got questions, what was he going to be like after a loss? I'm like, well, I watched a lot of his press conferences after losses, and he owned it, and he owned it today and just said, we didn't play very well, and that's the bottom line. And he was asked, is it a talent gap? He said, we wouldn't be 3-1 if there was a talent gap. He still likes what they got going on here. It was just a bad day.
Yeah, he used the words hot garbage to describe how his team played today, and said the biggest issue, and it was obvious to anybody that tuned in to ABC to watch this football game, was Oregon got pressure on Shedeur Sanders early and often and pretty much consistently throughout the game. He was sacked 7 times, I believe, and it felt like he was sacked even more than that. It was such a big impact each time he was put down on the turf, because it really put an offense that was one-dimensional behind the 8 ball time after time.
Yeah, and we've talked about it all season that, that offensive line has been struggling, right? And he came into this game the most sacked quarterback in the country, and he probably, who knows what's going on around the country, with all that right now, but he might still be that. And Oregon went after it, and they exploited what has been, a suspect offensive line to this point, and they got after it, and they couldn't run the ball. At the end, they finally got some things going, but couldn't run the ball. He was getting sacked all the time, and so they went after that offensive line, and, that's what teams are going to do until they improve that.
Remember, coming into the season, we were perplexed by just the wide range of expectations. You had folks that thought Colorado was going to win 1 or 2 games, and then you had other people that thought they were going to win 10 or 11 games. And we were kind of, at that time, well, it's kind of like the truth sometimes. It lies in the middle of that a little bit. Yeah. Now, people might look at this results and say, well, Colorado's way far away. It's also possible that this was a snowball game. And Oregon is a really good football team. I'm not taking away from that. But I don't think Colorado, if they played Oregon 10 times at a neutral field, is going to lose on a consistent basis like they did today.
Yeah, I think Oregon might get them, 9 times out of 10, if not 10, but maybe not like that, to your point. I think that this is one of those things that just kind of kept going. And Coach Prime mentioned it, that, that fake punt early in the game, he felt was maybe a bit of a turning point, and that Oregon was rolling, but CU had a stop on defense, and they were in Oregon's inside its own 20, runs a fake punt, keeps that one going, and adds another touchdown. And he didn't really say this, but it seemed like that maybe deflated CU to a point that like wow, we can't even stop them when we do something right. And from there, as Coach Prime said, they kept rolling from there. And so I thought that was sort of a turning point, is when they were able to make that play, because if CU was able to get off the field, which they sort of did defensively, right? You think you're going to force a punt, and then they do that. But if you're able to get off the field there, then maybe you get something going. But to your point, that's a snowball type of thing.
Shedeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I don't care what happened out here today. He is. Yeah. But there's too much pressure on him right now, and he can handle a lot of that pressure. But against these elite teams, you have to be a little bit more balanced. And I know Coach Prime isn't really worried about the run-pass ratio, but it just felt like some of those sacks were coverage sacks, because Oregon really only has to defend one thing, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying they need to go 50-50 with the pass and run, but you got to keep defenses a little bit more honest. Now, Sean Lewis has forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. And the low-hanging fruit for fans is often the offensive coordinator or the officials. So I try not to do that. It just felt like Oregon was just sitting back and pinning their ears back in the trenches, and it was tough for him to get anything going as a result of that.
Yeah, and they haven't had a great running game all season. And I thought, once you saw Alton McCaskill here, like, okay, that's someone that can get that running game going. I was a little surprised we didn't see him until garbage time late in the game. I mean, they didn't use him. I thought when he got in there, I'm like, well, if he's ready, why wasn't he used early in this game? I thought that he could have been a difference maker today. That's what I thought. Who knows if he would have. But, that was the type of back you think could be something to get that running game going, but they got to get going. You're right, it doesn't have to be 50-50, but at one point late in this, or in the second half, I was trying to look up what's the lowest rushing yards they've ever had at CU, because they were at -41 late in the third quarter, and the record's -27. I thought, geez, they could actually go for the record here, but they got some runs going on late, but that's how bad the running game is right now.
A few bright spots. Giovanni Antonio comes back at receiver, makes a few nice plays out there. Defensively, Jaquez Robinson gets a start, and he's the first player to force a turnover from Oregon's offense. First pick for Bo Nix this year, and so that was a bright sign for him. They rotated a lot more defensively than we've seen at any other point this season, and a lot of guys getting in the mix. Brendan Gant got a little run in there, Travis Jay as well. It's hard to take too much solace in that if you're a CU fan, but there are guys that are working their way in the mix, and some of those guys made plays at other Power Fives before, so maybe as they continue to get into the rhythm of game reps, they can improve a little bit. Coach Prime was asked about Travis Hunter, and he just admit it hurts us a lot when he's not out in the football game on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and Shedeur said the same thing. He said a lot. That's two players. I mean, that's your best player probably on both sides of the ball you didn't have today. And frankly, there's not a lot of teams in the country that would come into this building against the top 10 team in the country without your best player and win a football game. Now, they lost it pretty handily, and Travis, I don't think, would have made the difference in a victory, but he could have made a difference in making this a respectable, entertaining football game. And I did like Coach Prime's comment. I asked him, was it good to get some of those guys in there like Brendan Gant, Travis Jay, and he goes, no, it means we got our butt kicked. So I kind of like his comment there. He's always entertaining, at least, but I think it was good for them to get some of those guys. Let those guys get a little feel for what it's like playing for Colorado. Get their first reps under their belt this season, because those are guys that could help you down the stretch.
Dan Lanning is a good football coach. He also took over a program that won 10 games the year before he took over. And I don't like hypocrites. For him to come out and say that we're not in it for clicks, we're in it for wins, as the head coach of the University of Oregon, that took some stones, because this is a program that's known for its flash. Now, again, I think he's a really good coach, but it just seemed, again, like a really dumb thing for an opposing coach to say. And he backed it up in terms of his team winning this game, but why? Why does he have to say that?
Hey, at least he's I guess. I mean, he's the first one to say it, at least, and they did, or to back it up at least, and so you got to give him credit for that. And I'll say this: I talked to an Oregon writer, at halftime, and he's like, he goes, I really don't think that Lanning has anything against Dion or the Buffs or anything. It's just, Oregon looks at it like this was ABC. This is a chance to have a huge audience. Let's show the country how good we are. And he thinks a lot of it was really about them, and they did that. Oregon took advantage of the stage that they had today and showed everybody, hey, look at my quarterback. Look at our running backs. Look at our defense. And Oregon made a pretty big statement today. A lot of people, who knows what the numbers are, but it keeps going up every week for CU games. That could have been 10 million people watching this game. A lot of people saw that, and that was a huge statement for Oregon to make. And that, to the Oregon writer's point, that wasn't necessarily let's make a statement to Coach Prime. It's let's make a statement to the country. And really, for a team that's going to the Big Ten next year, that was an important game, I thought.
And Coach Prime was asked about those comments. He said he heard them. He keeps receipts, but he does have a lot of respect for Coach Lanning. He made that very clear. But he also said, you better get me now, because this is the worst we're going to be. And based on everything we've seen since he's been hired in Colorado, I would imagine that's going to be true, that this program is going to keep getting better. And so it's tough if you're a Colorado fan to lick your wounds after a game like this, but the future's so much more bright than the games we covered here in the past when Colorado was getting blown out by the Ducks.
Yeah, and Coach said that as well. We could probably do a whole video just based on his comments. It was, he's always entertaining. One of my other favorite comments is, if I was playing, we would have dominated that football game. So, yeah, he does still like the future of this program. And I do think this is just the starting point. And you and I have talked about it so many times that there's going to be ups and downs. They've had some ups. They've had some so-so games. This was a big time down. They've had it all in 4 games at this point. And so, there's still a lot of football to be played. I still think this is a team that's going to get to a bowl game and win at least half their games, if not more than they lose. So I think, to me, this is a blip. This is one you learn from and you move on.
And they have obviously a huge challenge coming up with USC. I think pretty much everybody nationally is just going to write off Colorado going into this game. I wouldn't be so quick to do that, as good as USC is, and obviously we'll get more into that matchup. But coming back to Folsom Field, there's going to be a lot of fight left in this football team. And, again, this is different than previous years when they've been coming back from a blowout loss.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say this, too. I mean, don't be surprised about fans if Colorado falls all the way out of the rankings after a loss like this. I think there's probably a lot of writers around the country that are probably waiting for something like this to happen so if they don't have to rank CU anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised if they fall from 18 all the way out. But yeah, but next week's game, I don't think today has anything to do with next week. I mean, there's a lot of things this team can fix. I still think next week is a great opportunity for them to go out and get an important victory.
Outside of 2016, we've covered some rough games here for the Buffs, but this is it. This is the last trip to Autzen Stadium in the foreseeable future, and we'll be heading back to Boulder, and we'll see if Colorado can bounce back.